previously, two members of our congregation are sharing their faith journeys with us today, and how those journeys may have been influenced by acceptance. We'll begin as strangers and end with the gift of knowing a little bit more about each other. Our first speaker is David Ryan, and he'll be followed by a special musical offering, and then our second speaker, Maria Dixon. So I'd like to invite David to come up.
Good morning. Thank you. So this month's theme is acceptance, so thank you for graciously accepting me in place of Reverend Andy, who is irreplaceable. So I grew up in Massachusetts, just outside Boston, a town called Wayland. And this story starts in a highway interchange, a pretty complicated one, outside the Boston area. There's a rotary and multiple exits, and it's really hard to figure out what's going on. And most of the lines are well worn away by snow and salt, and it's really not a fun thing to drive. And this is where my sister asked my dad why we didn't go to church. We were two little kids in the back seat, maybe 3, 4, and that's where she drops it. So he's, gripping the wheel, and he grew up Irish Catholic and perhaps fell, and my mom grew up Jewish. So they sought out something because they decided they wanted something in our lives. So we founded a church in our hometown. My hometown was established in 1636. The meeting house that I grew up in was built in 1787. The bell in the chapel was built by Paul Revere and Sons. Henry David Thoreau went to services there. It was history. And it was a really cool place to grow up. I had a really excellent lead minister, Ken Sawyer, who is pretty well known in the Hebrew world with some pretty fantastic sermons. And I also had the privilege of growing up with a minister, who was lesbian. And as a gay kid growing up, that was a nice framework to have, who had been a house painter before on Nantucket and became a minister. So two different kinds of worlds. And I grew up going on relief trips to New Orleans and visiting different faith houses around the area, learning about all kinds of faiths and learning what worked for me. It was a nice framework for me to grow with because I have not had one belief system my whole life, and it's been nice to have a religion and grow up in one where I've been able to adapt as I've grown. So that's how I grew up. I moved out here for school in 2011, and I had some challenging years in college, and it was really nice to again find a place where I had a framework to evaluate a challenging part of my life. So this month's theme is acceptance, and I wanted to tell a story about something that happened to me maybe about 6, 9 months ago. I was in the car driving home from work, and I listened to Marketplace, a program on NPR that is produced by American Public Media, and there was an interview on the program, and it was with this son and father, this kid named Owen Susskind and Ron Susskind, and they're the stars of this movie Life Animated, which came out in 2015. It's a documentary about his life and their life growing up together. And I was sort of beating myself up driving home. I really wasn't being nice to myself. I sort of felt stagnant in my career and didn't feel like I was really moving forward, and I had a lot on my mind, and I didn't think that I was really reaching what perhaps a meaningful life should be at the moment. And Owen has severe autism, and when he was younger, he disconnected from the world, and he and his parents couldn't communicate for years. And eventually, his dad, years later, broke through by using a Disney character's voice, because Owen loved Disney movies. He watched them all day long. And his whole worldview is Disney movies. It's not based on Disney movies. It is that Disney magic, which is really kind of cool. And you know, when someone has a mental disability, people, you know, pass judgment about what does a meaningful life look like for that person. And part of the movie is about exploring what does a meaningful life look like for him. And in the interview, the interviewer is asking him this, you know, what does a meaningful life look like for you? You're like, who gets to decide that for you? And he said, I do, without missing a beat. And I just burst into tears in my car. And I smiled because he had something that I hadn't figured out yet. And, you know, sometimes acceptance is this, you know, this gracious thing we give, or, but sometimes acceptance is that sort of opposite of faith. It is that acceptance that maybe we are in our 6th year of college and working full time. Maybe we do have, you know, a few things to check off on our to-do list, and maybe we could do a few things differently, but that we get to decide what a meaningful life looks like. I do. You do. So, thank you.
Hello, I'm Maria. Like we've been talking about this theme, the theme for this month is acceptance, and I started with I must be feeling some acceptance by this group by getting up here and agreeing to read a story that I was inspired to write after I was asked to present. This is different for me. I don't know why I'm so nervous because I teach at ASU, but I'm going to share a personal story with you about how I got here. So here I go. Everyone on my father's side of my family has a nickname, and the nicknames don't relate at all to their given names, and for most, we don't know why we got our certain nicknames or why people started calling us that. But I had an aunt named Gypsy, and when she wasn't around, my family called me Gypsy, avoid confusion. But like my aunt, I'm the oldest of my siblings, but unlike her, I do know why my family sees me as Gypsy. My mother has a few pages in her address book that are just for me, even though she said that she would only write my addresses in pencil. She still insists on writing them in pen. But I've moved a lot as an adult. But before I became an adult, I started moving a lot because of decisions that my parents made when I was a kid, an infant. Just before I was born, my father started a career that made us travel as a family. And every 3 to 5 years since I was an infant, we moved all over. So mostly we moved in Central and South America with a few assignments, few times that we would come back to the United States where my dad would get his next assignment, his next tour. So people often ask me if that kind of life was hard. And just the other day, somebody was asking me if it was difficult to start out over and over again. And yeah, sometimes it was hard. And if it was hard to find acceptance in all the different schools I went to and all the different communities. And yeah, sometimes that was hard. But overall, I can say I really loved that life. I got to see a lot of different people. Sorry, am I getting too close? Can everybody hear that? Okay. Okay. Sometimes it was hard, but I got a chance to see a lot of different kinds of people, see a lot of different places in the world. And I like to say that I did that. I tell my students I did that before it was easy, like before Facebook, before instant connection, traveling around the world through the internet. But one of the things that I loved the most about traveling was being able to try out something new. One of the things I did was always try out a different part of my personality as I moved. I felt like I could get, as I was figuring out who I was, I could get a little redo on whoever I was. I could redefine myself newly to people who didn't know me. One thing I remembered is like if I did something embarrassing in a certain place, all I had to do was wait a couple of years and nobody would remember. So, that was pretty cool. One thing that happened in my high school was I was the person who regularly dropped her lunch tray in the cafeteria, and this will tell you how old I am, but my whole school would start singing and Queen's Another One Bites the Dust. So, that happened for a couple of years, and I would join in, and then I got to move. Nobody remembered that was my thing. So it might sound like that I didn't want to accept myself in all those moves because I kept changing who I was. But that really wasn't it at all. I think I was really trying to figure out and discover who I was through all those times, and it really led me to who I am today. I was really trying to figure out and discover, all the different parts of me, like how I connect with people, what's my place in this life, in this world. I still get twinges now every 3 to 5 years that I got to change something. I got to move. I didn't put this in here, but when I interviewed for my job here, they kept looking at my resume and saying, "We see you're here you move every 5 years. Like, is that the time limit that we have here?" And I do. I feel like I have to move. I just have to make a change. Usually, the change means that I have to move, but a lot of times it just means I need to redefine myself or redo something. Change my identity a bit. And I've had a lot of them over my life. So I listed a few. A competitive swimmer with one arm, an artist, a jewelry maker, a statistician, a seamstress, a palm reader, a census taker, a belly dancer, a flamenco dancer. Those were a long time ago. A knitter, a teacher, a speech-language pathologist, just to name a few. But one thing that was true is that the identity of being a joiner was not something that I saw for myself. I wasn't in a sorority in college, although all of the females in my family were all in the same sorority, and I was supposed to do that. I didn't join the debate club in high school, even though my principal said that he was very, I was on student council. He was very confused about who I was. He told my parents that he never knew where to find me in any given day. Like, I could be at the railroad depot with a skater crowd. I'm a child of the 80s. With a skater crowd, eating lunch with freshmen, hanging out with a student council group after school, or going to the beach with the preppies. But we called them, I went to high school in Panama, we called them los plásticos. In Panama, but he said she's not running for any office, but she's all around these places. But the journey that I went on in moving around in my whole life since I was born, I think is mirrored in my same journey, my spiritual journey, too. I've moved around to a lot of different faith traditions a fair amount of times. And all those times consisted of me learning about, visiting, trying on different faiths, redefining myself, redoing a little bit. Each time I learned something different about myself. Sometimes I stayed with that faith tradition for a while, and sometimes I didn't. Sometimes I would start over, and sometimes I think it was hard because I was trying to find some acceptance. And unlike my moving around to different places, I think in a faith tradition, I found the difficulty for acceptance a little bit more acute if I wasn't accepted someplace for one reason or another. I always felt that there would come some point in my visiting that I would be asked I would be presented with an ultimatum, do this or not be one of us, believe this or not be one of us. And so that was tricky. My first Unitarian Universalist service that I went to was in Washington, D.C., and first I wrote 20 years ago, and then I did the math. 25 years ago. So, and I wish I could say that that's where I started attending regularly, but I still didn't go then, even though I really identified with the message. But I really felt that it didn't fit like what I thought like a faith should look like. I went there and it looked churchy, and inside looked churchy, and there are pews and everything, but I just couldn't do it, So I had it just didn't fit my schema. I had a circuitous journey in and around, and I gravitated back and forth to UUism when I moved to Indiana, when I moved to Maryland. And I kept getting this message of the most significant to me that kept coming up was the acceptance of the inherent worth of people, the journey of truth-seeking among other people who are doing on different parts of the journey. And for me, my journey to Unitarian Universalism and traveling just has a lot in common. The connecting with people, accepting other people, trying on the different identities. And through all that, I can say I landed, like about 4 or 5 years ago, I started coming to VUU. And that's when I was like, okay, I'll do this, And I came to UU like kind of waiting for something to happen. I sat in the back, I think, and when it came for time for visitors to stand up, I didn't do it. I was too nervous. I was like, oh my gosh, they'll make me join or something like that. But the following week, I kept thinking about the message, the community, the feeling here, and I did feel warmth and acceptance. I told myself I'll come back one day, and I came back the next time. Every week was like, I'll see what happens, see if I'm busy. And I came back. I kept wanting to come back, and that was a new feeling for a Sunday. So I joined VUU about 1.5 years ago, so now I can put on my identities as a joiner. So, and I've accepted that being a UU is who I am. It's part of my definition, and it's one of the things that I was saying, I feel here's warmth and community, but also being able to be around a group of people who are really genuinely practicing all of these things that we talk about has really made me feel like part of this community, accepted at VUU, and that's a nice place to be in my faith journey and my spiritual journey. Thank you for letting me share.
The Red Brocade, a poem by Naomi Shihab Nye. The Arabs used to say, when a stranger appears at your door, feed him for 3 days, before asking who he is, where he's come from, where he's headed. That way, he'll have strength enough to answer. Or by then, you'll be such good friends you don't care. Let's go back to that. Rice? Pine nuts? Here, take the red brocade pillow. My child will serve water to your horse. No, I was not busy when you came. I was not preparing to be busy. That's the armor everyone put on to pretend they had a purpose in the world. I refuse to be claimed. Your plate is waiting. We will snip fresh mint into your tea.